Montana Territory, June 1876. The first gunshot cracked through the pine-split silence just as Penelope Osborne pulled water from the creek. She dropped the bucket, heart slamming into her ribs. The second shot came quicker, closer. She turned, skirts catching in the underbrush, and ran toward the cabin, toward her children. "Ansel! Abigail!" she yelled, branches slashing her arms as she sprinted uphill. By the time she reached the clearing, the cabin door was wide open and smoke drifted from the chimney. Her son, Ansel, just 9, stood frozen on the porch, eyes wide. Abigail, 6, clung to his hand, barefoot and trembling. Inside, Penelope shoved them through the door and dropped the wooden bar across it. She pressed her back to the wood, chest heaving. Out the window, 3 men on horses circled the yard. Rustlers she could tell by their cheap coats and how they sat too straight in their saddles. Not locals, not neighbors, strangers who wanted what little they had. "Stay down," she hissed to the children and grabbed her father's old rifle from the wall. It was too long for her arms and too old to promise much, but it was all she had. The men were shouting now, asking for horses, food, liquor. The one in front pointed his pistol toward the house. Penelope raised the rifle. Then another shot rang out, but it was not from her. From the trees to the west, a rider came fast, rifle raised. His shot hit the lead thief's shoulder, sending the man spinning from his horse. The other 2 turned toward the trees, but the rider was faster. Another bullet, another man down. The third bolted, galloping back toward the trail. Penelope stared through the smoke and pine dust as the stranger brought his horse to a stop in front of her porch. He dismounted slow, boots sinking into the dirt. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a weather-bitten face and eyes the color of washed denim. His hat was torn at the brim, shirt soaked in sweat and dust. "You all right?" he asked, voice low and steady. Penelope nodded, still holding the rifle tight to her chest. Her hands were shaking. You shot them. They were aiming to hurt you and your young ones. You think I was just going to watch," she swallowed. "Who are you?" He looked down, brushing dirt from his hands, then back up. "Harlan Decker. I was headed to Bozeman, heard shouting, saw the rifles. Figured I'd help." Penelope studied him. He looked too tired to lie. Still, she nodded toward the porch. "Come in," she said. "Let me fix your arm." "I am not the one bleeding," he said. "You are now," she said, pointing at the red soaking through his sleeve. He looked down, surprised, like it had not registered. "Huh, guess I am." Inside, the children stared at him with wide eyes. "Ansel, Abigail, this is Mr. Decker. He helped us." Penelope guided Harlan to the table, pulled a clean cloth from the drawer, and poured whiskey over it. "You will need to take off your shirt." Harlan hesitated, then peeled it off, wincing. The bullet had grazed his upper arm, tearing skin but not deep. Penelope worked fast, dabbing the blood away, pressing the cloth firm. "You did not have to do that," she said quietly. "I did," he replied, looking at her. "No man with a heart rides past a mother and 2 children being threatened." She met his eyes. They were calm, but something lived behind them, something tired, something hollow. "Men like that do not stop easy," she said. "They will come back. Then I will stay," he said. "You do not even know us," she whispered. He looked at her then, steady and sure. "You have 2 children and a home worth protecting. That is enough." She turned away, busying herself with the bandage. "You will get hurt. Then I will heal," he said softly. "With you near." Penelope's hands paused, her breath caught. Ansel stepped closer. "Mama, is he staying?" She looked at Harlan. He gave a small nod. "If you will have me." She looked at her children, at their hopeful faces, at the terror still fresh in their eyes, and then back at the man whose arm bled on her table, but whose eyes were kinder than any she had seen in years. "All right," she said. That night, Harlan slept on a bedroll by the hearth. Penelope kept the rifle beside her bed. But when she woke in the dark hours before dawn and heard him shift, heard him whisper something like a prayer to the coals, she knew she had not made a mistake. The next morning he chopped wood without being asked. He fixed the hinge on the barn door. Abigail followed him around like a shadow, offering daisies and questions. Ansel asked if he could teach him to shoot. Penelope watched from the porch, arms crossed. Harlan caught her looking once. He smiled just a little and turned back to the boy. That afternoon, they buried the 2 rustlers in the woods. Harlan said nothing while digging, but Penelope saw how his jaw locked, how the muscle in his cheek jumped. "You have seen worse," she said when they walked back. He nodded. "Too much." She did not ask more. She just walked beside him, close enough that their hands brushed once and neither moved away. By the third day, the children had started calling him Mr. Harlan. By the fifth, he was teaching Ansel to saddle a horse and had carved a wooden doll for Abigail. And on the sixth, as Penelope stood by the fence watching the sunset, Harlan stepped beside her. "You are not used to help, are you?" he asked. "No," she said quietly. "Not since my husband left. He walked out 5 years ago and never came back. I have done it all since." He looked at her, long and steady. "You should not have had to." She turned to face him. "I did." They were quiet a long time, then she said, "You are not running from anything, are you?" He shook his head. "No. Just looking for peace." "Well," she said, voice softer now, "you might have found some." He nodded. That night, as the children slept and the fire burned low, Penelope offered him a blanket for the couch. He looked at her, touched her hand lightly as he took it. "Thank you," he said. Their fingers stayed touching longer than needed. She did not pull away. And outside, the wind blew gentle through the trees. On the 7th morning, Penelope found Harlan fixing the fence along the north pasture, sleeves rolled up, hair damp from sweat. He moved with quiet purpose, driving each nail without pause, the rhythm of it steadying. She watched from a distance, hands wrapped around a tin cup of coffee gone lukewarm, and tried to name the feeling curling in her chest. It wasn't trust yet, but it was close. Later that day, a wagon rolled up the ridge. Elmer Tully from 3 homesteads south brought flour, a sack of salt, and news from town. He eyed Harlan as he climbed down, then tipped his hat toward Penelope. "Didn't know you'd taken on a hand." "I haven't," she said. "He rode in when trouble found us. Helped." Elmer's eyes narrowed. "That's so?" Harlan didn't speak, just stood beside the fence post he'd been shaping, arms crossed. "Sheriff's asking about some fellows shot dead on the trail north," Elmer said, voice low. "Said they'd been part of a crew robbing ranches between here and Madison. One of them had a brother in town raising questions." Penelope's jaw tightened. "They came here first. They had guns. My children were outside." Elmer looked down, scuffed his boot through the dirt. "I'm not saying he did wrong, just saying folks are talking." "I'll go to Bozeman if I need to," Harlan said, tone even. "Tell them what happened." Penelope stepped between them. "No one's dragging you off anywhere." Elmer's eyes shifted from her to Harlan and back. "You always were stubborn, Penny." "I always had reason," she replied. He gave a grunt and climbed back into his wagon. "Watch yourself," he called as he turned his team. "Storm's brewing west. You'll want everything tied down." They watched him disappear down the trail, dust rising behind. "Folks always that friendly?" Harlan asked. "Only when they want something," Penelope said. "Elmer's been circling this land since my husband vanished." Harlan glanced toward the hills. "You think he'll cause more trouble?" "No," she said. "He's a coward. Just likes to talk like he's not." That night, while the children sorted corn husks by the hearth, Penelope brought a tin plate to Harlan on the porch, beans and salt pork, still warm. "I didn't ask," she said as she handed it over. "Where were you before here?" He took the plate, considered. "South of the Powder River. Worked cattle with a Lakota man and his sons for a season. Before that, Wyoming Territory, mining town that went dry." She sat beside him, folding her hands in her lap. "You don't seem like a man who stays put." "I wasn't," he admitted. "Didn't see much reason to." And now, he looked at her, eyes catching the last of the firelight from inside. "Now I do." She didn't look away. "I don't need saving." "I know that," he said. "But maybe I do." Their eyes held, and in the hush between words, something unspoken shifted. Not new, but clearer. Inside, Abigail laughed at something Ansel said. The sound settled the air like dust after a long gallop. "I keep thinking," Penelope said, voice lower now, "about what you said. That you'd heal with me near." "I meant it." "I don't know how to help someone like you," she said. "You don't have to," he said. "Just don't send me away." She turned her face toward the darkening trees. "Then stay." That night, Harlan stayed up after the fire burned low, mending the leather harness Ansel had split trying to buckle it too tight. Penelope found him there when she rose for water, head bowed, working by lantern light. "You should sleep." "I will," he said, threading the needle again. "Just want this done before he sees it." She watched his hands. You don't do anything halfway, do you? He smiled faintly. Never saw the use in that. The lamp flickered between them. She stepped closer, rested her hand lightly on the edge of the table. You don't have to fix everything, he met her eyes. Maybe not, but it helps me try. She didn't answer, just reached for a second cup, filled it, and set it beside him. I'll see you in the morning. Good night, Penelope. She paused in the doorway. Good night, Harlan. And for the first time in years, she slept without waking at every creak of the wind. The rain came sudden, a hard curtain of water sweeping in from the northwest, flattening the wheatgrass, turning the clay paths to soup. Penelope had just set the wash to boil when Harlan came in from the barn, soaked to the elbows, hair plastered to his neck. His boots squelched as he stepped inside, cradling a limping chicken under one arm. She got herself caught in the fence wire, he said, setting the hen gently in a corner basket lined with burlap. Wings torn, but it'll mend. Penelope grabbed a towel from the peg and handed it over without a word. He dried his neck while she kneeled beside the bird, examining the wound with practiced fingers. It wasn't deep. You've a way with injured things, she said, not looking up. Maybe I see too much of myself in them. She glanced up then, but he was already turning toward the hearth, laying his hat near the fire to dry. Later, after supper, Abigail dozed off with her cheek against the quilt's edge. Ansel sat cross-legged, carving an arrowhead from a scrap of wood. Penelope reached for her sewing basket but paused as Harlan stood, soft-footed, and stepped onto the porch. She hesitated, then followed. The rain had gentled to a mist, the air thick with the smell of damp pine and wood smoke. Harlan leaned on the post, arms folded, watching the dark hills. His shirt clung to him, still damp despite the fire. You don't sleep much, she said, drawing her shawl tighter, not when the wind sounds like hoofbeats. She stepped beside him. You served, he nodded once. 3rd Cavalry, camped along the Platte when the war ended, then out west. Never went home, she waited. He didn't say where home had been. You lost someone, she said, not as a question. Harlan's jaw moved, but no words came for a while. A brother, younger, thought he could follow me into war, didn't make it past the first winter. She didn't offer comfort. Only stood beside him, her silence a kind of steadiness. After a while, he spoke again. Your boy, he's got your eyes, knows how to keep still when he's watching, like he's listening for more than just sound. He's had to, she said. When folks leave, it teaches children not to trust noise too much. Do you think he trusts me? I think he wants to. Harlan looked at her then, slow and searching. And you, Penelope, didn't shift under his gaze. I don't know what to call this. But my hands don't shake at night anymore. He stepped closer, his voice low. I'll stay as long as you let me. She studied his face in the half-light, the lines that memory had carved deep. You'll get hurt. Then I'll heal with you near, he said, her breath caught just a little. She reached for his hand, and he let her take it. His palm was rough, warm, steady. I don't want promises, she said. I'm not offering any, he said. I'm asking for a place. She looked out toward the distant trees, dark against the moonrise. Then take it. He leaned forward, pressed his forehead gently to hers, breath slow and quiet. No rush, no claim, just being there. Inside, the fire crackled low. The wind had stopped. The house, for the first time in years, felt like it belonged to more than just memory. By late July, the heat settled thick over the valley. The air held still and heavy, the kind that pressed down on your shoulders and made even the pines seem to bow. Days stretched long with work, and evenings came slow, edged with a hush that felt earned. Harlan had taken to rising before the first light, tending to the livestock before the sun crested the ridgeline. Penelope would find him some mornings, kneeling in the garden rows, weeding with a patience that surprised her. He didn't speak much during those hours, but she noticed the way his shoulders eased when the soil came up clean in his hands. One afternoon, she found him in the shed, bent over a wooden crate. He looked up when she entered, wiping sawdust from his brow. What are you building? She asked. Box for the churn, he said. Yours is cracked through the bottom. She leaned against the doorframe. Didn't ask you to do that. You didn't have to. You always like fixing what's broken, he met her gaze. Only if it's worth the work. She stepped closer, brushing her fingers along the newly planed edge. You're not easy to read. Don't mean to be hard to know, he said. Just got used to quiet. Penelope reached beneath the workbench and pulled out a folded piece of cloth. "Thought you might want this," she said, handing it over. "Found it in the loft, my father's apron, wore it working leather." Harlan unfolded it, ran his thumb over the worn hem. "You sure? He's been gone near 10 years. If you've got use for it, then it's yours." He tied it on without another word. She watched the way he handled it, gentle, as if it still held something sacred. That night, a knock came just after sunset. She opened the door to find a boy no older than 16, rail-thin, clothes soaked in sweat and trail dust. He held his hat in both hands and shifted from foot to foot. "Ma'am," he said, voice hoarse, "they told me you might take me in for a night. I got turned off from the cattle drive out of Virginia City. Been walking near 30 miles. Penelope hesitated, then she stepped back. "Come in. You'll sleep in the shed, but there's warm food and water." The boy looked past her toward Harlan, who stood behind the table, one hand resting on the back of a chair. "You live here?" he asked. Harlan nodded. "You got a name?" "Illy." "Illy Mercer." "You in trouble, Illy?" "No, sir," he said quick. "Just hungry." Penelope made him a plate and set it out on the porch. Harlan brought out a blanket and a jug of water. Later, after the door was barred and the children were abed, she stood by the window, watching the moon slip between clouds. "You believe him?" she asked. "Enough," Harlan said. "But I'll keep watch." She turned from the window. "You always carry this much weight on your shoulders." He looked at her, the lantern casting deep shadows across his face. "Only when I find something I'd fight to protect." She crossed the room, slow, steady. "I don't know how to be soft with anyone." "Not anymore." He took her hand, rough against hers. "I don't need soft, Penelope, I need real." She didn't look away. "Then stay with me, not just tonight." "I already have," he said. She touched his cheek the first time and he leaned into it, closing his eyes, no promises, no declarations. Just the quiet knowledge of two people choosing the same ground to stand on. Outside, the crickets hummed low, and the boy in the shed turned beneath his blanket, dreaming of a safer trail. Inside, the fire burned low, and Penelope leaned into the stillness of a home no longer held up by one set of hands. The morning after the boy left, Penelope found Harlan fixing the latch on the chicken yard with a strip of scrap iron. The sky was clear again, the long grass still slick from last night's storm. She carried a folded letter in her apron pocket, one she hadn't opened in over a year. "I need to ask something," she said, standing just outside the fence. He looked up, squinting against the sun. "Someone wrote me from Helena last spring, said they'd seen my husband there, selling pelts under a different name. I never wrote back." He straightened, brushing metal filings from his hands. "Why not?" "Because I didn't want to know if it was true," she said. "But now, you're here. And I keep wondering if I should have finished that story before starting another." Harlan walked to the gate and propped his arms across the top rail. "You didn't start anything you weren't ready for. I didn't expect someone to come along who'd look me in the eye like they saw what was there. Not just what was missing." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "If you want to go to Helena, I'll take you, and if he's still there, I'll wait outside while you ask what you need." "I don't want to see him," she said, "but I don't want to keep wondering either." They left 3 days later. Mrs. Cadwell from the neighboring homestead came to watch the children. Her hands were stiff with age, but she'd raised 5 sons and didn't flinch when Abigail asked if she could sleep with her doll under the quilt. The ride to Helena took 4 days. Harlan led the horse most of the way, letting Penelope rest when the trail grew steep. They didn't speak much, but their silences were easier now, filled with a kind of settled knowing. They arrived mid-afternoon, dust in their boots and saddle sores deep. The town had grown since Penelope last saw it, new buildings with painted trim, a telegraph wire strung down Main Street like a black thread. She walked into the trading post alone. When she came out, her face was pale beneath her bonnet. "He died 6 months ago," she said. "Fell from a bluff." No one claimed him. Harlan didn't speak, just waited. "He was using a false name," she added, "but I saw the description. It was him." They didn't stay the night. By the time they reached the 2nd-mile marker out of town, the sun had dipped low enough to burn gold through the trees. Penelope rode beside him now, reins loose in her grip. "I thought I'd feel something," she said. "Anger maybe, or peace, but I don't feel anything." "You don't owe him your feelings," Harlan said. He left those behind when he walked away. She looked over at him, her voice soft. I kept a space for him, not because I wanted him back, just because I didn't know what else to do with the empty parts. He didn't answer right away. Then, if you let me, I'll fill what I can. She reached across and touched his hand on the reins. You already have. They returned to the homestead in early August. The days were warmer now, the nights mild. Ansel had taken to sleeping on the porch, claiming the stars helped him dream better. Abigail showed Harlan the cornflower she'd pressed between the pages of her school primer. One evening, as they sat under the cottonwood behind the barn, Penelope rested her head on his shoulder. I keep thinking how different life looks with someone beside you who stays. He threaded his fingers through hers. I never planned to stop riding, he said, but this place. It doesn't feel like something I need to leave behind. You don't, she said. Not anymore. They married beneath that cottonwood in late September, just her and Harlan, the children, and Mrs. Cadwell, who baked the closest thing to a cake they'd ever had. Ansel wore his father's old vest, and Abigail picked wild asters for Penelope's hair. After the sun fell behind the ridge and the lanterns were lit, Harlan pulled Penelope close in the yard, swaying to a tune hummed more than played. She leaned into him, her cheek against his chest, and they didn't speak, didn't need to. Winter came slow that year. The snow held off until the end of November, and when it did fall, it came soft and clean. Harlan built a second room onto the cabin. Not because they needed the space, but because he wanted room to grow. Ansel learned to track deer with quiet feet. Abigail learned to spell her name with a flourish. Some evenings they played cards by the fire, and other nights they just sat, the quiet between them full of warmth. Penelope never wrote another letter. She didn't need to. Harlan slept beside her every night, his breathing steady, his presence anchoring her in ways she hadn't known she needed. She'd wake sometimes before dawn, press her hand to his shoulder, and feel the life beneath her palm. She had lost once, but she had chosen again, and this time she had been chosen back.